Ever thought the grungiest guy in jeans and a hoodie might secretly be the heir to gold mines? Ever slammed judgment on a stranger just because they looked average? Brace yourself, because what follows will dismantle those assumptions brick by labeled brick. Keep reading, and share it with anyone who's ever doubted appearances matter. The morning sky above New York shimmered with muted gray tones as early flights lined up like metallic threads against the tarmac. Inside the terminal, the atmosphere held its familiar symphony. Wheels rolling over linoleum, distant jet engines humbling the crowd, the echo of announcements that never really seemed to fade. In this temporary world of transitions and hurried goodbyes, one man moved inconspicuously, blended fully into the flow of ordinary travelers. He wore a faded gray hoodie, jeans frayed at the knees, and well-worn sneakers carrying thousands of miles in their soles. Over his shoulder, a modest duffel bag hinted at purpose, but gave away nothing about wealth, influence, or privilege. Nobody noticed this man. They didn't register the shaved head, the flecks of gray in his beard, the gentle but confident posture he carried. He carried no briefcase, no oversized designer suitcase, no bodyguard who eyed every glance. He made his way past information boards, security lines, and concession stands like a ripple passing through water, barely shifting the surface. Behind his unremarkable exterior lay a legacy of intelligence and innovation. He had built a company from the ground up, a company that became a quiet giant in America's aerospace and defense sectors. His name seldom made headlines. His face rarely appeared in whispers of the rich elite. He preferred anonymity, believing that real impact happened behind closed doors, not under camera flashes. His empire spanned continents, but he remained a man of routine, a man who found solace in bookstores, a man who smiled at the miracle of clouds passing overhead. He walked toward the TSA checkpoint for a standard commercial flight, picking Terminal 4 for no reason other than it aligned with his schedule. He didn't care about lounges or complimentary upgrades. He cared only about reaching his destination on time. He handed over a boarding pass that said "First Class" and watched the line behind it stretch into the crowd. Nearby, travelers tightened their grip on their phone-worn carry-ons, scanning faces with half-formed opinions of the people ahead. Security lights flashed as card readers scanned passes. Bags tumbled onto belts, lipped open, zipped shut with practiced efficiency. This man, the billionaire in hoodie, stepped forward confidently, prepared to wade through. He didn't dream of luxury lounges or elite perks. He simply sensed something he couldn't quite define, a hesitation in the air. A small doubt flickered in the eyes of the TSA agents. As they ran his boarding pass and ID through their screens, that doubt solidified. He passed through the line and straightened his shoulders as the TSA agent quietly flagged him for secondary screening. The hum beneath fluorescent lights intensified, telegraphed by the subtle shift in body language around him. Travelers paused mid-stride. The queue waited. The bright glare of suspicion sharpened. Seconds and minutes drew out, each fraction a beam spotlighting him. Suddenly, without exchange, protocols executed themselves. Fluids were poured. Bins were rummaged. The shimmer of a metal tester waved around his pockets as shoes were removed. The strangers on either side pressed their cell phones against their chests, leaning in, smirking at his supposed misfortune. Comments formed in their minds, even if they never surfaced aloud. Today that man had no shield of glamour. He was just another suspect in a sea of faceless travelers. Until the humiliating unmasking moment came. When the TSA agent announced he would need to empty his pockets again, the murmurs around him escalated. They sounded like thunder in his ears. This guy must have something suspicious tucked away. He watched his reputation and hard-earned credibility dissolve in the crease of an airport scanning tray, alongside lip balm and a boarding pass. He felt the weight of every stare, every glance that lingered too long. Luxury evaporated here. Millions of dollars evaporated here. Honor and respect evaporated under those sterile lights. When his boarding bag finally passed through the scanner and TSA wiped a verdict stamp across his back, the entire terminal exhaled relief. The message was complete. He had failed the test of appearance, and that failure was about to be permanently etched into the memory of onlookers. The man in the hoodie held himself still while the world's eyelids flicked open. Behind his calm exterior, he fought for controlled breath. Each glance weighed him more than the duffel bag he carried. Travelers picked up their belongings, pivoted past him in disdain, resumed their journeys. Some had paused, less out of empathy than curiosity. They lingered, hoping to decode his face. Was guilt written there? Shame? Defiance? A well-dressed couple nearby exchanged secret smiles, trading looks of superiority as they stepped ahead. The barista at the coffee stand wiped a countertop slowly, glancing repeatedly in his direction, clearly hoping he wouldn't come near to order. He didn't. He kept walking, hoping to outpace the whispers that fluttered in his wake. In his mind, he recounted the companies he'd founded, the homes he'd built, the breakthroughs he'd funded. He had put men on Mars and governments on alert. He had saved lives with satellites and armed nations with data. And yet, here he stood, reduced to an inconvenience, a security risk, a suspicious stranger. He navigated the crowds, weaving through chatter, toward Gate 22. He passed people streaming with pride over new business suits and luxury luggage. They walked as though the airport itself opened its arms for them, because for them, it did. They didn't feel heavy with humiliation or anyone else's pity. They walked quickly. He walked carefully. At the gate, airport staff double-checked boarding passes again. This second inspection felt like thin laughter directed at him. He noticed eyes hovering on his bag as he set it on the scale. He noticed others shifting as high-heeled women in sleek attire sent him sidelong glances. He stood there in that universal boarding queue, feeling like a curiosity, a footnote. He clenched his jaw, anger tasting metallic, but he didn't allow himself to blaze with it. Instead, he anchored to composure. Eventually, his name was called. He handed over the pass and card again. The agent scanned it. The mechanical beep lifted the temporary suspension. He boarded first class, but nobody noticed. He took his seat, gently placed his duffel in the overhead bin, and exhaled. As the plane pushed back from the gate, city lights blurred behind him. He watched through the window, tired and unseen. He'd taken an emotional journey that hadn't even lasted an hour, yet had felt much longer. He had descended from CEO to suspect and quietly ascended back to passenger status. But the stigma followed him. How many whispers followed him aboard? How many brows stayed lifted toward him? He closed his eyes and prayed for privacy above the clouds. He'd never asked for forgiveness, for the irony, or for the offense. But he longed for forgetfulness, to be invisible again. Above a sea of molasses clouds, the jetliner found its brisk climb. Food trays glided through the cabin. The sound of coffee pouring droned low. Half the cabin rested, half stared at glowing screens. He shifted slightly in his seat, seeking comfort. He felt the fingers of fatigue slip into his consciousness. But he also felt a blade of tension, a guard erected by indignity. He reached into his duffel bag and pulled out a slim notebook. Inside, he had penciled meeting outlines, thoughts on sustainable energy, fragments of poetry he'd drafted years ago. He preferred analog over digital when on a long flight. He penciled now, line after line, but the words came slowly. His mind replayed everything that had happened in the terminal. The humiliation made rational thoughts brittle. He closed the notebook and leaned back, taking a deep breath. He realized something important. His reputation didn't rely on how others saw him today. His identity carried years of effort, success, and trust. That identity wasn't erased by the judgment of random strangers in airport aisles. He could not claw out of memory, but he could anchor within himself who he was, beyond others' perceptions. Light filtered through the cabin window and brought a measure of calm. He opened his notebook again, this time writing reflections, lessons on humility, values, empathy. He realized that those travelers weren't malicious. They just followed instinct. They made assumptions because appearances are human shorthand. He recognized that he too did the same to others. The coloring of someone's teeth, the crease of someone's coat, they stirred judgments. Judgments rooted in fear or envy or plain ignorance. By the time the drink cart came by again, he ordered a simple water. He thought about how easy it would be to drop this event into press conferences. His PR team might spin it, crafted quotes about humility, hashtags about next time you see a hoodie. But he wanted truth, not spin. He swallowed the water and returned to reflection. He decided that tomorrow he would act. In Denver, he'd host a small gathering, invite some of the people he had tripped over in that terminal. He'd tell his story and ask for theirs. He'd buy coffee for TSA agents. He'd fund scholarship funds for travelers in need. He would transform his humiliation into human connection. This was a man who quietly wielded billions in dollars, but much more quietly wielded respect for people, regardless of their suit, gender, or origin. The plane hummed steadily. He sank into thought. He was in control again, not of how others viewed him, but of how he would respond. The cloud cover lost its altitude. The sun returned gently. Somewhere between heaven and earth, the plane leveled. And so did he. They descended toward Denver in slanted sunlight, the sky clearing in gradations of orange and gold. The seatbelt signs clicked off. Travelers stirred and stood. The man in the hoodie rose steadily. His backpack slung lower this time. He carried something intangible yet heavier. Intention. He stepped onto the jet bridge with purpose. The cold Denver air bit at his face, but it felt genuine, unlike the hollow relief he'd felt boarding the flight. He retrieved his bag and walked through the terminal. His stride was measured, unhurried, and directed to a small corner cafe inside the airport. He'd called ahead hours ago, booking enough space for him and whoever wanted to join him, for coffee, for conversation. He arrived early, the time between planes stretching ahead of him. He placed the first order, a round of lattes for himself, second, an espresso on the house, third, a pot of hot tea. He'd invited TSA staffers, gate attendants, one of the sharply dressed businessmen who'd laughed at him. He'd called him, explained the story without revealing his name, invited him to come hear it firsthand. He left a seat open for that couple, and for the barista too. People arrived one by one. First, the gate agent offering polite gratitude. Next, a TSA supervisor, shaking his head to show empathy and apologizing for protocols. Then came the businessman, looking curious but cautious. The barista followed, wiping her hands on an apron that had seen better days. She set down a plate of croissants. He nodded. The moment was simple and human. He stood and gave no speech. He didn't need applause. He just shared the truth. He told every word, from the ticket flagged at security to the stares at the boarding gate. He said how it felt to be invisible, and then intensely visible. He confessed how he fought to remain honest to himself, and how it had shifted something inside him. Heads nodded. The businessman blushed, saying his judgment had been automatic, one of many he carried throughout the day. The TSA supervisor admitted policy had overshadowed humanity. The barista described how she'd seen too many people as an annoyance. One guest, a small mother traveling for her son's graduation, cried quietly when she recognized the universal shame sprayed over them all. This impromptu gathering lacked fanfare, yet carried weight. In that airport cafe, humanity rekindled its spark. They realized how fleeting power structures could be. They saw that judgment could hurt as much as any act. And they felt how repair, an apology, a gesture, even a shared cup of coffee, could start healing. When it was over, they sat quietly for a while, sipping warmth, watching the terminal bustle beyond the window. He quietly slipped away after thanking them, too personal for a public gesture. He left a card, no logo, no title, just an invitation. Come visit me. We'll talk again. In the days that followed, letters of thanks came from participants. They described being humbled, inspired, changed. On social media, an airport witness wrote, "Never judge the hoodie, might be your next best friend." Corporate blogs picked it up, but he insisted they leave out his name. He wanted the message, not the vanity. Those who had sneered at him, his story reached them in different forms. The businessman admitted remorse and donated to community scholarships. The barista received a tip, an invitation to a tech tour. TSA revised internal training to include empathy before procedure. He quietly pledged a fund for it. He never claimed credit. He just looked ordinary again, next time he passed through an airport scanning tray. But now people looked again, some in doubt, some with new respect. Appearances couldn't fool them this time. A hoodie no longer meant nothing. It meant someone who carried both silence and storms. In the end, judgment became the thing he stripped away. Not from himself, but from others. What had started at Jetway 4 with humiliation turned into a lesson of grace. And those who scorned him learned that sometimes billions couldn't buy dignity, because dignity came from actions, not assets. And so, years later, or maybe tomorrow, when another traveler boards an ordinary flight, his story will still be a draft of hope. A reminder that names don't define us, appearances don't confine us, but actions, gentle, brave, restorative, can reshape everything.